we were talking about costumes, and somebody was asking me a question as to when we thought of seasons, how would we visually tackle the soundtrack and the visual. That's the first time I really thought about costumes. Till then one was just innovating and improvising with existing designs and patterns. That was the first time when I said we have to have something that is not totally in the traditional mold, so to speak, the fan, the 5 parts that we wear, but at the same time it has to be very comfortable to be able to do large movements, because in seasons we had very large movements as well, stretches and a lot of even traditional adavus which we need to do. So the first time I actually asked a costume designer to step in, and also we needed it to be very happy because it was seasons. So we needed that whole thing to be, and we were using the cyclorama which would change colors. So we needed something that wouldn't disturb that. So we finally decided on a black pajama costume, which was a new style. It had the fan, but it was not a separate fan. It was a kind of a fan attached to the pajama itself. And then we used mailaks of very different colors, bright colors, so that but you know, when you innovate or when you kind of move out of the tradition, like Chandralekha for example, when she did when she stepped out and she came into the group work and she did her first work, she didn't use any costumes. It was basically just the half sari, and she wanted to say no jewelry, no costuming, in the sense no special costuming, only half saris. And she said what she had to say, and it was so effective that you didn't miss the costumes. So that's another approach where you want to showcase the dance for what it is, dance for dance, you know. You don't go into the glamour quotient of the dance at all. More of a theatre approach, very minimalistic kind of an approach. So that's another approach to how one can handle your work as well. But we were still kind of, because the grandeur of the soundtrack was so much in seasons, that we wanted it also to be some amount of grammar in the dance of Bharatanatyam grammar. We were still kind of keeping it intact. So we thought it should be halfway somewhere, you know, not completely giving up the costuming part of it also, but we re-looking at costume, which would help in movement and which would help in not hinder in. But one departure we did make was we didn't use bells, because the definite points which were there, we didn't want to kind of highlight those points because it would disturb then the music, you know. So we just didn't want to, and I must say even Chandra never used bells in that sense, you know, later, because it was a lot of yoga also there. So you know, you move and you do away with some things, you keep some things. That's how you kind of move out when you see contemporary people trained in a particular genre and they move on. Then there are certain things that you retain, certain things that you kind of give up.
Akka, in the Nritta, or when you were envisaging seasons, because the music was so different, and you said that you could do all Tehis and Tehis through the music, but were you open to the idea of using movements outside the grammar of Bharatanatyam, or did you completely stick to?
You know, I didn't need to in that particular thing, because the music was so kind of, one could do so many of the existing adavus, you know. You could catch a tisram in the walls section, you know, in the later section. You could catch a mishram. So, you know, you had so much in the music that you could get the parallel in Bharatanatyam very clearly. So I didn't find the need to look for a new vocabulary. You look for a vocabulary beyond when there is a need for it. You see, like when I did Kaikei, for example, I did martial art with the theatre director, and I had to look for movements which were very, very different looking from the traditional movements, because it was dance theatre which was coming in, and there the pure dance had to be something that was coming together of Bharatanatyam, Tai Chi, of martial art. It was the coming together of so many elements, even of theatre. So it was a very different kind of an approach. So I had to look for a new vocabulary to do that, because he was very keen on that, because then I was a material in his hands also, the theatre director Rashid. So theatre and director and me working together. So looking at a vocabulary which would be, you know, kind of working for both, and there was pure dance in that also. There was in fact a jati which I did using that new vocabulary. There was a lot of floor movement, for example, which is never that often that we do in Bharatanatyam, but there are floor movements. So I guess, you know, it's a question of each production requiring different things.
In fact, I remember in seasons earlier when we
sun.
showed the arrival of the sun on the chariot, we used to actually jump standing up, do like a jog, and you changed that later, saying that there's no need to do this because we can show this exactly through Taiha Tehis in Bharatanatyam. So
and we do about 50 Taiha Tehis. So I guess, you know, it's just a question of for each production having a different mandate, and pure dance is always there in every production that we do, because in some form or the other, and it's a question of how you tailor it to suit that particular work. Because Kaikeyi was the most challenging for me, because that was the maximum I went out of my domain. That was the farthest I went, so to speak, you know. So because that was completely different vocabulary which had to be worked out. So that part of it was kind of very strenuous for me to do. But as Bharatanatyam dancers, I feel whatever you create, if you have had a successful 15-year training in 15-16 years serious training in Bharatanatyam, whatever you do, you can't compromise on the technique. You know, there will be a classical body which is already there. So, you know, when you kind of do it really cannot go too far. You know, you anyway end up coming back to the folds of Bharatanatyam, particularly in pure dance, and you end up doing, of course, re-looking at some of the adavus, definitely, because even a Tayyum Datta adavu, if you see, we started doing it this way, you know. And as we said in the other adavu patterns also, even a Takita was necessarily not always, a Tatai Teta would go that way. This is not restructuring, this is actually changing around the entire adavu structures. You know, it is not, it's so conditioned to do a Takita like this. Nobody would think of doing a Takadimi to come back. So this all requires sustained work, and something has stimulated you, some music or some bit has stimulated you to create that particular thing. You don't sit in isolation and create. A certain context is there where you need to create, and you create. So that's how the creative process happens. It doesn't happen in isolation.
Like in seasons, you said you were listening to music from the Bawat Sangeet, and then when you wanted to choreograph seasons, you felt a connection with the music. And so when you were choreographing it on your students, did they also feel the connection?
Immediately.
Did they find Mishram?
Any student would have. It's just you need the antenna to kind of find the connection, you know. So it's just a question of each of them felt the same, you know. And I said, look, this is just unearth this and you find it there. So I don't think it was only me. Everybody found the connection, and everybody.
They didn't find it difficult to say structure Tatte Taha on that music.
You know, we've even done Mandi Adavu to that. So it's not at all. And then the Tate Teta sat so beautifully, the Nadais sat so beautifully on it. So it was absolutely no strain to kind of choreograph that, because once you draw a basic connection, then I was just sitting with a Drupad artist, and you know, this is how things come out, I'm just saying. And because many people ask as to how can we proceed from here? You know, it doesn't happen in the classroom. You have to interact with musicians, with you know, visual artists, with theatre people, watch a lot. From where what sparks off, you don't know. I was sitting with this person and he said, oh, you're a dancer, I think you might find this interesting, and he sang a nirgeet, which is something which doesn't have meaning. Jantum jagadiga valita digi digi titi chala kucha jala titi cha jantum jagadiga valita digi digi titi chala kucha jala titi cha jantum. Now I did an entire pure dance sequence with this, with just very slow movements, and in fact that was the time when I was working with another Kathak dancer. So she just grabbed it from me and she said, this is ideal for me, give it to me. So I guess this kind of a thing happens a lot. And then I think we should also, one, as youngsters, I think I would recommend that one must understand the tala, particularly when you're coming to the pure dance, understand tala cycles of other styles. Because more and more one is expected to work with other styles. So basic tala cycles of Kathak, of Odissi, I think one has to know. It's not enough to just know your own style. And I think that's something that is kind of, we are also very myopic about our own style. We know very little about the other styles. So I think
the emphasis is so different.
It's so different.
Even in the same 4x4, the emphasis
1-3, 1-4, it could be so different too. Suddenly, you know, so the emphasis, maybe you can also derive from that and take your tala cycles to a new, so that could be one way of exploring and to kind of move out of your own little circle that you have, to move out and to experiment. And anyway, as I said today, a lot of it, many of you dance with other dance forms. So you need to have an understanding to see how the, you know, where are the common spaces that you can find and do. Any other questions on this?
Akka, I want to ask you something, coming back to her words. When you said you used puppets, and I remember there was a huge puppet of just a face and two big hands. How did you choose? Was that a conscious choice of making movements which were large, which look large as, you know, when put together with the large puppet, or was just simple movements working together in the puppet?
So there were 2-3 things in that. One was a large puppet at the back, just the face, if you remember. That's what you're talking about. That was just a witness of what was happening. The whole story unfolding in front. So I would go and ask for help even with that. I would cry with that and see what horrors are happening here. Wipe the tears of that. So it was a very, very symbolic kind of a witness there, watching what was happening. So there were different devices used, but that's nothing to do with Nritta in that sense. You know, it was just an Abhinaya device there we've used. Another thing that where Nritta can be enhanced, particularly in group, is lighting. Because costume, lighting, music, all these areas contribute to group work, particularly music. Why I am saying is because most of the time in a group work we use recorded music, because it's very difficult to get musicians to practice at odd hours, and we practice 6 to 8 hours in a group.
Group requires a lot more rehearsals.
Lot more rehearsals. We can't afford musicians with coming for rehearsals so often, because we need to try out many things, and it becomes very difficult to ask musicians to come all the time. So the soundtrack needs to be very rich. So for example, in the Mallari we used octaves, harmonies, we've used more percussion. So it becomes a richer source for us in a group, because it's not one person dancing. So we even multiply voices, so that it becomes like many voices. That what is that Mallari, you can harmonize. tam dim tatum tadim tarita ka jonu tarita ka jonu tarita 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 ka jonu tarita tom tarita ka jonu tarita tadingina tom tam dim tatum tadim. You know what I understand? So it becomes very rich. Tom tadim tarita ka jonu tarita ka jonu tarita ka jonu tarita tom tarita ka jonu tarita tadingina tom tam dim. See, so when multiple bodies are there, you have this effect. It creates a lot of pure dance mein weight aata hai, and what you do looks very grand suddenly, you know, with this kind of it's less lifts. Aduvar Ayanaduvar Kanaka Sabayil Tanaka Magiruma Ananda Natana Madum Takita Tajono Takita Yana Adum Tille Chidambaran Parashivane Arul Purivadam Din. So a lot of thought goes into, you know, the group work and how well you can present it to optimize the presentation. For example, when you use lights for a group work, you actually light up the area that you want the audience to have the attention on. Many things might be happening, but the focus has to be on the things that you want the audience to focus on. So if there are three groups, maybe two are dimly lit, one is very harshly lit. You know, so these are devices which you work out on,
which are also choreographic devices.
Which is absolutely choreographic, and it is not that you create the work and then you tell the light person to come, hey, hello, please light us. It's not like that. He sits there through the choreography and he tells us what is possible. I remember in Pratidwani we had that line which was turning. We were doing the Panchanadai actually. We were doing the entire Panchanadai sequence in that turn. And in that turn, we wanted to know what could be the best light. Should we just show the feet? Because there were 10 feet or 7 feet, which means into 2 means we had 14 feet beating. So we wanted that how only the feet could be shown, so that the enunciation of the pure dance was there. So I guess those are devices which we also use, very important to highlight what we would like to say and to create the desired effect for what we want to say. So I think this also Anarth, if you see, Anarth is another work where only light beams are used just to show the feet, just to show the hands, just to show the face. So that's another choreographic device which is used while creating work. So light is a very, very important aspect of group work particularly. Again, you can't differentiate. When you say light, it is for the entire production. You can't say for Nritta alone or for Abhinay alone. I mean, it's an overall impact that it creates. Any other questions?
Akka, maybe this is a little bit outside of the scheme of things that we've been discussing so far, but how do you copyright? Suppose you create a new movement. What is the process now as youngsters? We have so much exposure, we have so much access to social media and videos being flown around everywhere. How do you know what is authentic, what is not? How do you...
No copyright, no, not possible. You just do and just leave it for others to copy.
The right to copy.
Because I've seen my work being happily duplicated with no credit anywhere. So I guess this is something that we are too young to still address, because there's no money for all these things to be even discussed. So I feel that it's best left the way it is, because many years back we were the first people to talk about copyright in Natya Vriksha, when a colleague, a very good friend, a senior musician had a problem with another dancer on copyright, and she'd done the music and the dancer said it was her music. So she reached out for help to us and she said, would you do a seminar on copyright and bring out this issue? So we happily did. We were the first ones to do that seminar, but we couldn't follow it up, you know, and keep at it, because this, we either can do our work or we can do all this. So one person can't do too many things. So I guess, you know, we did not pursue it after that, but I'm sure others are pursuing it, and there is some kind of a, because you know, you can't copyright a movement or you can't copyright an idea. I don't know how you do it.
In academics, for instance, the more you reference, the more a better scholar you are considered.
Correct.
So we are not supposed to take other people and assume and you know, pretend to be knowing that.
But here the guru knows everything is the kind of attitude. So
But I guess
if you,
if
if
you take
even
from
if you give
someone
credit,
reference,
yeah, we always credit. We always credit, but I don't think that's the norm. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Okay. Yes, you have a question? You sighing like this. So we've done costumes, we've done light, we've done music. We can do nothing about the audience. But the audience loves pure dance. That's for sure. So I think anybody who attempts anything will surely do pure dance, because that's the joyous part of the dance, and that's what really impacts and
gives identity to the form.
gives identity, brings out the form in all its colors and hues. So pure dance is indeed exciting to do, and to always work out newer patterns from existing patterns is always wonderful. Okay, thank you.